I want to look at the larger background, the privacy, democracy, rights and freedom, which are threatened by not one but many Pegasus kind of packages. Democracy is not a software package. The people who wrote the code, which you call Constitution of India, they were freedom fighters. They fought for the rights, for the democracy, for the human rights and fundamental rights of the Indian people, and gave you one of the finest democratic constitutions in the world. Today, that constitution is severely endangered, heavily undermined by a very large number of actors, and Pegasus comes as a whole new level to the attack on democracy, to the attack on privacy, to the attack on fundamental rights, on human rights. I suppose many of you already know it, but what is this word Pegasus? It comes from Greek mythology. It is about a winged horse. Telugulo, I think, Rekkala Gurram ani cheptaru adi. Horse with wings. The other thing that exists actually as Pegasus is the constellation, the star constellation called Pegasus. So, I mean, my knowledge or technical knowledge of Pegasus is limited to those two things. Yeah. But it is the latest stage in the creation of a super surveillance state. And now, see, it also does not make sense for me to talk about the technology of Pegasus to a large number of B.Tech students and engineers. But I think that you are the very people who have to pose yourself a couple of questions. What sort of society do we want to live in? What sort of institutional, national framework do we want to live in? Democracy implies rule of law. It implies rule of law. It implies fundamental rights, including the right to privacy. It's not just about elections every 5 years. If we are in the 75th year of our independence. We'll complete that year next August 15. But I have been doing a number of interviews and stories on India's last living freedom fighters. The youngest of them is 93. The oldest of them is 104. They're alive. 2 weeks ago I met N. Sankaraya, who completed 100 years, and Chief Minister Stalin of Tamil Nadu called on him to present him the equivalent of Tamil Nadu's Bharat Ratna. But in all the interviews I've done with these people, Captain Bhau, the man who led the greatest train robbery in Indian history, when they looted the British train and looted the payroll of the Bombay Presidency and distributed that money to starving peasants and workers during the Bengal famine. Yeah? All of them, you ask them, what did you fight for? They don't say, we just fought to throw out the British. They don't say that. They say, we fought for a great society. We fought for a good society. We fought for democracy and equality and liberty and fraternity. There's a very beautiful essay by Baba Saheb Ambedkar on how all liberty, equality, fraternity, all of them are important. You can't just take liberty and ignore the other two. One of the Captain Bhau, Ramchandra Shripati Lad, who was the founder of the Tufan Sena, an underground armed wing of the Prati Sarkar, 1943 the farmers and workers of Satara in Maharashtra declared independence from British rule. Koraput did that, Midnapur did that, Chittagong did that. But the bulk of our succeeding generations grow up as foreigners in their own country. We know so little about who these people were, what they did. Captain Bao told me when I was congratulating him, he began his 100th year on June 22nd. When I spoke first to Captain Bao and congratulated him on fighting for India's independence and freedom, he corrected me. He said, "You're not right. We fought for independence and freedom. We achieved independence. We fought for independence and freedom. We achieved independence. Freedom is still the monopoly of very few." That insight, one of the most beautiful political science formulations that I have ever heard, comes from a man who was just a small 2-acre farmer who led the people of Satara into battle against the British. Every one of them will tell you, we fought for human dignity. We fought for dignity. We fought for the right to lead our lives with dignity. The discussions I've had with them give me such an enriched understanding of what is democracy. It's not an election every 5 years won by the party that gets 87% of the electoral bonds. Now look at the wonderful thing. In the electoral bonds, the people, the multimillionaires, the crore-patis who buy electoral bonds, they are guaranteed privacy and secrecy. They are guaranteed secrecy. You cannot ask who gave 85% of money to one political party. Those people have complete privacy. They have. But Supreme Court judges who give dissenting judgments, activists who stand for ordinary and poor people, they are not in any way entitled to freedom, to justice, to the most basic promises of the Indian Constitution, which begins by promising justice and equality for all, social, economic, political. A much richer understanding of what is democracy, a much richer understanding of what is rule of law. If we look at who were the targets of, as Pramod pointed out, the astonishing diversity of the targets, 3-4 things come out. Okay, on the one end, a Supreme Court judge, he was serving then. On the other end, a virologist, one of India's leading virologists in the Christian Medical College, Vellore, Gagandeep Kang, all of you have seen her on television. She has been under Pegasus surveillance. Why on earth? What on earth are you doing this for? In what interest, which national interest is one of India's leading virologists so important to this country's vaccine effort, to our research effort on vaccines? How does this person come under Pegasus surveillance and her phone has been hacked in 2018? In 2018. So this extraordinary, again I'm saying, do not take Pegasus and isolate it as one package. If we deal with Pegasus, there is no problem. Pegasus has given us an opportunity to do a post-mortem on what is the problem. Pegasus has put the spotlight on the post-mortem, on the autopsy. Just like COVID-19 has given us a brilliant autopsy of the corpse of Indian society. Pegasus has given us incredible insights into how we are running a corporate authoritarian state. These technologies, and this is a very serious question for all you techies. I work a lot with young techies because I run the People's Archive of Rural India, and it is entirely possible, it exists entirely because 100 young techies of your age group did free labor and built this. They did free, many of them are with Swecha. They did free labor and built us a platform, I believe, worth at least 2.5 to 3 crores worth of input. The question is not technology in itself. The question is, what do you want to do with it? Why did you get into this field? Did you get into this field because you want to connect with your society? Because you want a more just society? Because you want to use technology, as it has been used several times, for something more meaningful, greater and higher in its aims and objectives? Or did you get into technology to help the corporate takeover of Indian democracy from the individual voter, from the ordinary Indian? Okay. Already you consider, just consider, I believe that the kind of things that are happening with technology focus on the central problem of India in the last 20 years. And that is the incredible growth of inequality. Who is able to afford and use these technologies? Who do they use them against? Labor leaders are there in this list. Farmers leaders, the leaders of the protesters in Delhi, Singhu, Tikri, Shahjahanpur, their names are on these lists. WhatsApp, by the way, I see everybody is still using WhatsApp. I threw it out more than a year ago. I use Signal. WhatsApp admits that it was the entry gate for more than 1,428 or something like that. It was the entry gate for penetration of 1,428 phones or devices with Pegasus. But that's not the only device. And before that, as Pramod mentioned, you saw what happened with Cambridge Analytica. Facebook tries to look very innocent. But the scale on which that data was misused tells you. In our own country, without Pegasus anything, look at the incredible mess we have made of people's lives with the Aadhaar card, where this highly confidential personal data, please, in Mumbai's Lamington Road, you can buy it for 500 rupees a CD. Okay? You can buy Aadhaar data for 500 rupees a CD. As and when new batches of Aadhaar data come to the central database, there are people say, your data, your personal life, your personal information is available on some CD for 500 rupees. No one has made an assessment of the extent of identity theft that has been perpetrated under this. Okay? There are many processes going on, and each of them is contributing to deepening and deepening and deepening the inequalities. So don't isolate this revelation as separate from what is going on in our society. Understand that this revelation gives you a microscope and a telescope to look at what is going on. It is the new level. But it works in conjunction with many, many other actions that we are taking. The Pegasus, the NSO group tells you that they sell these technologies only to select national governments, not to individuals. I frankly, when the national governments are acting as the dalals of Adani and Ambani and Birla and Tata, what difference does it make? And I don't believe that they are not selling it to private players. I don't believe this. Or I don't believe, in any case, it is absolutely untrue to say that private players have no access to this surveillance system, because the simple question arises, who are you spying on farmers' leaders for? Are you spying on them for Parliament of India? Or are you spying on them for Ambani and Adani? For those for whom you passed those laws. So even if the private party does not obtain the surveillance system directly from Pegasus, they obviously have very strong access to it through government. Governments for whom they gave the funding for the elections, but their names are kept secret. Okay? You're living in a very frightening world. And you have to decide, those of you who are techies or will be techies, what do I want to do with these skills? You are the most skilled 1% of the world's population. You are the most skilled 1% of the world's population. What do you want to do with that? Do you want to do something for your society? As Captain Bao said, we fought for independence and freedom. We achieved independence. Freedom is still the monopoly of the few. So, what you could be looking at is how we fight for the democratization of the digital, the democratization of cyberspace. When the internet first came, there was so much romanticism. Internet is giving everybody a voice. The internet gives you a voice. It does not guarantee that anybody listens to you. The internet does not ensure that anybody listens. Yes. The internet does not ensure that anybody listens to you. That is also, the digital monopolies are the largest monopolies in human history. They are greater than the monopolies of oil, rail, air, gold. They are much greater monopolies. Please look. Google search, 78% of all search. 68% of all online auction, eBay. And now those 7 companies have become 4 or 3. Okay? That kind of frightening control of what we call the free internet. That kind of a handful of corporations are controlling the net. Now, why do I say that the digital monopolies and these horrible rogue techies like the NSO, why do I say that these are the greatest monopolies in history? I'll take, please. Why do I say that these are the greatest monopolies in history? What do they have that no other monopoly ever had in history? What do they have? Anyone wants to answer that question? What makes the digital monopoly, what is the special thing that they have that no one else has? No other monopoly, media monopoly, television monopoly, radio monopoly, none of these monopolies had one thing that the digital monopolies have. These guys own and trade your personal data. That is the difference. No other monopoly in history had that. No other monopoly had 4 billion human beings' data with them. No other monopoly in history could intervene in your personal data, hack into it, change it. They could censor it if they could find you, if they could find your data. Here, your data is in their possession. You are trying to get your data. You know, on Facebook, you may have, actually it is the social media is run on an entirely anti-social mercenary basis. You may have 1 lakh followers on Twitter. Does every tweet you put out, does it guarantee that your 1 lakh followers will, you want to make some post, special post on Facebook or Twitter? What percentage, as I'm running a website and I'm trying to publicize the work our people are doing, which is free, it is not commercial. What percentage of our audience can we reach? Through their ads, 2%, 3% maximum. I can reach free. Beyond that, for every click I'm paying something. Google clicks, Google ads, farmers protest Mida, they were, your Google's, if you wanted to advertise what you were doing, when it first began, it was 13 cents a click. Then as the agitation intensified, 27 cents a click. Then now 51, 52 cents a click. Okay. Now look at it. You have 1 lakh followers. I am the company. I don't allow you to reach your 1 lakh followers unless you pay me something. It's like I am holding your bank account, and each time you want to make a withdrawal or a deposit, you have to pay me something. Okay? Suppose tomorrow you send an email to your friend. I'm going to Sao Paulo, Brazil for a holiday. In the next 10 minutes, how many advertisements will be on your email from 5-star, 3-star, 1-star homestay resorts in Sao Paulo? You buy a book of Amazon. How many 100 ads will you get for other books? People have, a handful of companies have access to all your data. It's not that they are invading you and taking your data. You have deposited your data with them by participating in their structures. Whenever there is that level of monopoly of information, there is no democracy. There is no democracy when incredible levels of inequality make it possible for a handful of corporations to rule the world. And those who rule the world of information and knowledge and the digital space, they are the most unequal leaders of all. And they are the greatest elements. Remember, no other monopoly in history had the right or the capability to harness your local data, to harvest your data, to sell it. And by the way, there are certain things you want, your own data is processed and given back to you for a fee. That also happens. You are paying for your own stuff. In the internet, by the way, all of us are consumers, we are also all producers. Right? So this is something, try understanding this process, what's going on, with your original history of a fight for an independent, secular, democratic state, where the first words of your constitution and the directive principles of state policy, which were put in by people who gave their lives for your freedom, say equality and justice to all, social, economic and political. Now, if you look at the farmers' agitation that is going on, I said it isn't Pegasus and technology in isolation. All the other things that are happening around us, all the other stuff that is happening around us, is part of a complex. These acts and actions are happening together. But all these acts and actions, the changes of law in parliament, the inequality factor, all these act together towards one end that is further deepening your inequality. You know, let me give you, by talking about inequality, let me give you the example of the Parliament of India. Ever since 2004, you're all aware that the candidate has to file an affidavit stating my total wealth is so many lakhs, so many thousands, so many crores. That is the law. Very good law. But it does not demand attachment of your income tax returns. So you can name any figure. The election affidavit is giving you your self-estimate of your worth. And people, crorepati's become very modest when it comes to that. Because tomorrow the income tax department will come and say, this is what you have said. But look at what has happened, and it will tell you what has happened in your society since 1991. When we embraced a path of development, when we embraced a set of policies that has taken our inequality in Indian society from between independence and 1980. Income inequality in India fell. It dropped. From 1990, it has increased so much, so incredibly high, that the last these levels of inequality were seen were around 1921. Sorry, 1921. 1921-22, we saw the levels of inequality. Remember that those levels of inequality led to a national struggle. Now look at Parliament, composition of Parliament. From 1991 it starts changing, but we have data from 2004. Electoral affidavit. In 2004, the Association for Democratic Reforms, they are the biggest and the best electoral watchdog body in India. ADR, Association for Democratic Reforms. They analyze every election affidavit. It is open to you. You can get onto the Election Commission's website. You can get onto ADR's website. You can read everybody's election affidavit, see the amount of lying that goes on, and some very creative writing. Very, very creative writing. Yeah. Your former Chief Minister, Chandrababu Naidu, assessed the value of his flat in Jubilee Hills at 23 lakhs. When he filed that affidavit, 5,000 people wrote to him telling, we will pay you 5 times that amount and buy it. Anyway, so this sort of nonsense goes on, but still it showed us. In 2004, 32% of all MPs were crorepati's. 32%. 2009, 53% of all MPs in Lok Sabha, in Parliament totally, were crorepati's. And re-elected MPs showed asset increases of 150 to 6,000%. Andhra Pradesh holds the proud record in 2014. Okay, in 2009, one gentleman from Rayalaseema who filed an affidavit of 6,800 crores his wealth. Now, so the percentage of crorepati's in Indian Parliament, 2009, on the basis of electoral affidavit, was 53%. 2014 election, guess what? 82% of all MPs, 82% of all MPs were crorepati's. 2019 election, they disappointed me. It only went to, they couldn't keep up that growth rate. 88%. 88.2% of all MPs in Parliament are Karodpatis. Now, these are the people, these 543 men and women are going to represent the poorest people on earth. Are they going to represent the poorest? They are representing the poorest people on earth. They've got elected there and they have a right to say we are the representative of the people. In what fashion, please tell me how a gentleman of 6,000, self-declared worth of 6,800 crore, a self-declared worth of 6,800 crores is going to represent the woman agricultural laborer who seeks work on the NREGS for 200 rupees a day. How is she going to, how is that person ever going to represent her needs, her aspirations, her requirement, her human rights, her democratic rights? Please tell me. That man who wrote 6,800 crores on his affidavit, 88% of Parliament is going to represent more than 50% of the population who earn less than $3 a day. Ask yourself whether this is realistic, whether it is optimistic, or whether it is plain stupid to imagine that this will happen. Those inequalities, now let me give you that kind of inequality in larger terms, not just Parliament. All of you have heard of Forbes magazine? Forbes, have you heard of it? Yes. Forbes magazine is the oracle of global capitalism. Every year they track number of dollar billionaires. This is what Captain Bao said. We achieved independence, not freedom. Freedom is a monopoly. Freedom is something to be paid for. Watch. In 1991, when we adopted the new economic policies, there were no dollar billionaires in India. Last year, 2020, there were 140. In 2004, there were 8. 2008, there were 12. 2012, there were 53. In 2019, there were 102. And in the pandemic year, in a year when GDP shrank 7.7%, you are all aware of that. Government of India figure, GDP shrank 7.7%, but the wealth of 140 individuals doubled to $596 billion, which is 23% of your GDP. 22.7% of your GDP is in the hands of 140 individuals. In the pandemic year, when GDP fell by 7.7%, Mr. Mukesh Ambani's wealth went up 167%, 129%, and Mr. Gautam Adani's total net worth went up 467%. He's got all your GVK airports, everything now, okay? 467%. Now, India added 38 new billionaires. In that, very large number were pharma health sector billionaires. That means while people were dying in lakhs, somebody was making huge money. There are, in the 140 billionaires, there are 24 healthcare sector billionaires. And the top 10 of those 24, if you read the People's Archive of Rural India, we have given you all these figures in Telugu also, please. You will find it in Telugu also. We publish in 13 languages. We publish free of charge. We do not take subscription fee. We particularly aim at students, and in Indian languages for those who cannot afford. Therefore, we keep no subscription fee. But the point is that the 24 billionaires out of 140 are from healthcare sector, and the top 10 among them added to their wealth on average, 10 healthcare pharma people, every day on average together they added 5 billion rupees to their wealth. 5 billion. 5 followed by 9 zeros. Okay? Here were people dying without vaccine. Here were people dying without health care. Here were people who could not get a bed in the hospital. Everybody sitting in this auditorium has had some experience, some relative, some close friend, some brother or sister or mother or father whom you have run from hospital to hospital for admission. People who paying in the black market for oxygen. But those who own the healthcare sector, privatized healthcare sector, every day of the pandemic they added, just the top 10, added 5 billion rupees every day. Mr. Mukesh Ambani's wealth is $84.5 billion. You know what that is? That is equal to the GDP of Punjab. Punjab's GDP is $85.5 billion. Mr. Ambani's is 84.5, but Mr. Ambani's value is growing 120% a year. Punjab's GDP is going to fall because you're going to take the wealth of those farmers and give it to Mr. Ambani. Enta anyayam chudandi. What kind of injustice that is? What kind of injustice? Now, now I ask you again, who would be gaining from planting Pegasus on the phones of the farmer leaders? Is national security going to gain? Or is Ambani going to gain and Adani going to gain? This Pegasus certainly was used in the Bengal and Kerala elections. And you can see opposition leaders, Bengal, Kerala, Tamil Nadu, they were all on the list of penetrated and hacked phones. You're looking, the one element of democracy in India which was true and vibrant was electoral democracy. Now that also we are destroying. As a reporter, I have covered every general election in this country from 1980 to 2014. I did not personally cover 2019. But 1980 to 2014, and I was always so proud. I was so proud of our democracy in electoral terms because, anybody who was able to catch the imagination of the people could defeat the richest and most powerful candidates. When I was still a student, a few years younger than you, in 1971, Mr. Nawal Tata contested from the richest constituency of Mumbai, South Mumbai, where all the millionaires live. I mean, there are very few, but they are most prominent. Richest constituency, South Bombay, he contested. Against him, an unknown trade union leader. By the way, George Fernandes also contested, naam ke vaste. But an unknown trade union leader, Kailas Narayan Sarang, came and defeated a man who, the newspaper would not even carry his name. At least George Fernandes they mentioned. He is there. Otherwise, the entire speculation in the media was, what will be the margin of Nawal Tata? What will be the margin? Kailas Narayan Sarang defeated Nawal Tata by a very fine margin for 1971. Why? Because the imagination of the public was caught by bank nationalization, credit to farmers, abolition of privy purses and princely states and princely privileges and princely titles. Garibi Hatao, the imagination of the public was caught by the promises of the Indian Constitution, whether they might be delivered. They were not. That is another matter. But the election was fought on that basis. Where are you fighting on what basis are you now fighting election? The Grand Ram Mandir? Pulwama? That is what you are now fighting the elections on. More and more power. These are the 140 billionaires. The money they put into electoral bonds, more than 85% went to one political party. Please understand that we are dismantling, where we were dismantling democracy brick by brick, but now you get something like Pegasus that brings a cyber bulldozer to the edifice of democracy. That is how you have to locate and understand what is happening there. Now look at what the government is saying. See, this democracy, as I am saying again and again, it means the rule of law, human rights, including the right to life, the right to privacy, the right to control your own personal information and data, that it is solely your right to do that, which was already undermined by. Now, you are not only able to extract data from someone's phone or laptop, you are able to plant false data on those phones and laptops, like you have done to the victims of the Bhima Koregaon riot, to Rona Wilson, Gautam Navlaka and others, where Rona Wilson's computer, some of the top Arsenal consulting firms, some of the top consulting firms in the world have confirmed, and studies by Washington Post and New York Times, who also submitted this to others, have confirmed that stuff was planted, emails were planted, words were planted on Rona Wilson's laptop, as a result of which he is in jail without trial now for more, 2 years almost? He has been there 2 years or more. Now, is this the technocratic, is this the techno nightmare that you want to build? That is what I want to ask the young techies, because I know that was not their purpose. I know the enthusiasm with which people in the age group 19 to 28 built my own People's Archive of Rural India for free. I know what they wanted. They wanted to build a better society. They helped us because we are a journalism website that looks wholly, dedicated wholly to rural India, to farmers, to laborers, to weavers, to agricultural workers, to the landless, to the Adivasis, to the Dalits. Because of that commitment, these techies came and built our website for free. So I know, therefore I'm saying the rest of you, I know what your natural inclination is. Please see how it is endangered and perverted by this sort of mischief that is going on. How does the government react to it? By the way, the control of information becomes central in all of this. Today, the largest newspapers in the country, the Times of India is the second largest English newspaper in the world. It used to be the largest. They are totally quiet on this. They are even supportive of the government on this. Right? They are not at all interested, because their own monopolies are threatened by information having free flow. Today we are in a very peculiar situation on media, information, privacy and knowledge. You know, in the freedom struggle, do you know that rest of India got to know about Jallianwala Bagh 1 month after it happened. Yeah. Total censorship of the media, including Times, Statesman, everybody, who were willingly censored. Jallianwala Bagh, the horror of Jallianwala Bagh was not reported. But for two groups of people, who were those? The underground revolutionary press. The underground revolutionary press and Chittaranjan Das, who sent people to the hearings on Dwyer's actions, and every day had two stenographers writing down what was said in those hearings, where Dwyer and Dyer admitted to many things, and they put it in the English press, and it was everywhere in the world. The underground press told people about Jallianwala Bagh in 1943. You know, everybody says Bengal famine 1943. That is wrong. It was the Bengal famine of 1942. It is only in 1943 that the Statesman starts covering the Bengal famine. Why? Because the underground press, Jugantar, New Age, People's Democracy, all these publications are writing about it. Finally, the editor of the Statesman has written, he has written in his memoirs, yes, we kept quiet for about a year because we thought the government is a good source, it's a good government, it will do something. We kept quiet for a year because we were not quite sure how bad it really was. Now here's the funny thing, that the world was dependent on the Indian underground media to tell them what was happening. Today, we are dependent on the French media, the European media, to know what is happening in Pegasus. Please, look, in the interest of human decency, consider how all the other countries and governments are reacting to Pegasus. Macron, that whole technology ministry has been turned upside down in France. Macron has ordered the highest level inquiries into Pegasus. The government of Israel has said Pegasus is connected to the defense ministry. The defense ministry pays Pegasus bills. The defense ministry of Israel vets what Pegasus projects are. They know exactly what this company is doing. They have sent a senior minister to Germany to pacify the government of Germany. They have sent senior ministers and top officials to France and Germany to pacify those countries. But in India, they haven't sent anyone because the government is doing the pacification. In India, they don't need to cover their butt because the government will do the lying for them. Please understand how disgraceful that is. How completely debased an understanding and level of democracy it is. The government has taken the position, in quote, there was no unauthorized surveillance. So that means there was authorized surveillance. Who authorized it? Can you say that no agency of the government of India purchased Pegasus? Please understand this. The number of targets ranging from opposition leaders in Bengal and Delhi to a virologist in Christian Medical College, Vellore, it argues that not one agency but multiple agencies are doing this. Why the hell does NIA want virologists' phone to be penetrated? Why on earth does the enforcement directorate or whoever it is want the phone penetrated of an opposition leader in Bengal? It means that not one government agency but multiple agencies dealing with different issues, different strata of society have been doing this. Now, the cost of it also argues the millions and millions of dollars, that no one agency in India has the budget for it. It has to be the black fund, the slush fund in defense and policing matters, they have that. That fund comes from the government of India. Yeah, but the government is saying no unauthorized surveillance. They're telling the court, we will do what has to be done in the interest of national security. The Home Ministry has not authorized any such thing. Actually, that contradicts what they said in 2018, where they said the Home Ministry has issued a circular for this anti-national activity. So at every stage they are lying, but the media are not going to challenge them because those who are, the media interests are tied to them. Again, the media's interests are tied so closely to Ambani and Adani. Why? How many of you know that Mr. Mukesh Ambani is the biggest owner of media in India? I hate disappointing all the proud Telugus here, but your ETV, except for the Telugu channels, all your ETV channels are owned by Mr. Mukesh Ambani. Did you know that? ETV Gujarati, ETV Hindi, ETV Marathi, ETV Malayalam, they are not owned by Mr. Ramoji Rao. That was more than 10 years ago. They are owned by Mr. Ambani. Now, he is the owner of Network 18, the biggest network of media in the country. Secondly, he is the largest media owner in the country. Third, those media that he does not own, he is the biggest advertiser. Now, in the pandemic, industry advertising has fallen very badly. Government advertising ratio has gone up. So, all these media are compromised and dependent on government advertising. N. Ram wrote 3 articles, devastating pieces on Rafale in the Hindu. After that, you see what happened to Hindus' government advertising. There is a lesson for everybody else. You mess with me, I'll show you what will happen to you. So that is another level of the problem. So you have obviously a government that is lying through its hat, that is making a mockery of the Supreme Court's questions. Did you use Pegasus? There was no unauthorized surveillance of anything anywhere. Now, if Pegasus is authorized surveillance, there is nothing left in the meaning of the word privacy and your personal information. If that is authorized surveillance, you're gone. You're a different society. Please note that in the last 2 years, in the last year, major indexes, Index of Democracy, We Democracy in Sweden, Freedom House in the USA, Reporters Sans Frontières in France, all have lowered India's ranking. And I am involved in one of the most mysterious commissions that you will ever hear about. I think several of you know that last year, Reporters Sans Frontières, World Press Freedom Index, Vinaradan Gunichi, rank 142. India's rank 142, below some authoritarian African countries also. Okay? Dictatorial state. Anyway, 142 rank. It was never great. It used to be 105. But last year, it fell to 142. We Democracy reclassified India. It called it electoral autocracy. Freedom House said partially democratic. Out there, Indian government got very upset. At the highest level, they formed Index Monitoring Committee. Who ordered the committee? Union Cabinet Secretary. Most powerful bureaucrat. He sent a letter to the Information and Broadcasting Ministry saying, form a committee, we must rebut this press index. Then They formed a committee on press freedom, and 11 out of 13 members are senior bureaucrats. 2 journalists. One, Rajat Sharma, the other, yours truly. They asked me, will you come on to it? I said, I will. But I am not here to respond to index of World Press Freedom Index ranking of 142. Because if I were doing a ranking, it would be much lower than 142. So I am coming to study the situation of press freedom. I don't care what a bunch of people in France think. I want to know what Indian journalists think. I want to know what Indian citizens experience. So I agreed to be on that committee. I was the only one who ever spoke in the meetings on issues. The other journalist attended 2 meetings and then said he was too busy. The rest of us are unemployed. We have nothing to do. And he never spoke a word in the 2 meetings. Then they expanded the committee members to 15, brought on 2 more journalists whom I had never heard of, and they also remained silent. Then they created a draft report which was essentially to rebut the World Press Freedom Index ranking. Then I wrote a note of dissent and I said, I don't want reconciliation. I want you to carry my note as an independent note in this report. February 2nd. After that, a committee instituted on the orders of Cabinet Secretary, the committee has vanished. No member of the committee has received a communication from the committee because they can't publish that. More than 1.5 months ago, an RTI has been filed on the case of the vanishing committee. No reply has been given. Now it is in the penalty phase where if the officer does not reply, he faces a fine of 250 rupees a day. Then also they are not replying. Please tell me how a high-powered commission could disappear. Understand what society you are living in. If they could do that to a committee instituted at the orders of Cabinet Secretary, why committees? Journalists will disappear. Journalists have disappeared. Several of them have been assassinated. People don't realize that Dabholkar, Kalburgi, Pansare were also journalists apart from Gauri Lankesh. Narendra Dabholkar ran a magazine for 28 years, Rationalist magazine. On August 20th, I gave the memorial lecture for Dabholkar, after which the organization that is, behind his murder bombarded me with 500 tweets, open letters, all sorts of things. But that's another story. Then, Pansare, retired trade unionist, not retired, he was still active, every week wrote in the Marathi press. His output was higher than mine. Kalburgi, regular columnist in the Kannada press. Gauri, top class journalist. So if journalists can vanish, their lives can vanish, why not committees? Understand that this whole thing is a complex of issues coming together. It brings you back to what is the meaning of privacy? What is the meaning of freedom? Is it the freedom? Is it, as Captain Bob said, only the freedom of the few? Look, the kind of arrests that were made in the pandemic year, Siddiqui Kappan in UP, arrested in October last year, no bail hearing, brought to a hospital suffering from COVID, chained to the hospital bed, an accredited journalist from Kerala. Zubair Ahmed in Andaman's Islets. What a situation. He published a story, confirmed story, that a family that rang up a member who, another branch of the family who were under COVID, the family making the call were taken into custody and quarantined the next day. I don't know whether COVID spreads over a telephone, but they were all held in quarantine until Zubair Ahmed and Island News published the story. They were released. After which Zubair Ahmed was arrested. Now they are entering your laptop and your phone and claiming that you were planning to do something. Like they arrest poor Dalits in UP for planning a dacoity just to make them clean the jail and the police station. Very common practice. Yeah. Especially around Janmashtami, when the jails and the police stations are very dirty. Now, you are being arrested for your thoughts. You were planning something. You are being arrested for your thoughts. There is no... The last that happened was under apartheid and Steve Biko in South Africa. To major people. Now it's happening across the board in India that you can be arrested for thinking. That you had thoughts. People put two girls in Thane put one Facebook post criticizing Mr. Modi or carrying a cartoon. FIRs are filed. Yeah. That kind of draconian, authoritarian, super surveillance society. And all these big digital monopolies are colluding with the government. First they make some noise and say, no, we won't do it. After that they do whatever the government wants them to do. Do you know that on February 5th, the Delhi police put on a tweet thanking Google and Twitter for its assistance in the Disha Ravi case. Okay? So these rights, these issues, these fundamental rights, these are in your hands. They are in your hands, and it's in your choice. Do I want the Indian democracy? Do I want the Indian democracy that our freedom fighters fought for? Do I want the India that is there in my constitution, in the directive principles of state policy, in the fundamental rights, in the preamble? Do I want a nation that respects human rights and human dignity? Do I want a democracy of liberty, equality and fraternity and rule of law? Or do I want that 140 individuals can run this nation and elect people by whatever means who will run my life, monitor my every move? Look at this. That is the choice before you. And I beg you, as all those techies who are about to go into this field, think about this. It's not just a matter of technological skill. You are having in your hands the potential of strengthening or severely undermining democracy, India, of your constitution, of your freedom struggle in the 75th year of our independence. I am satisfied, I know which choice you will make, but the choice has to be made by you. Thank you.